to make sure I do not have well, I do not know how to open the chat, so maybe you could go through Chloe for the questions, and Chloe could ask me the question. All
If there's
right?
any questions, I will.
Yeah,
And maybe you can even raise your hand or just give me a sign if you would like to ask your questions yourselves. And I'll just let Robert know that you have a question.
excellent. Well, hi everyone. I'm so pleased to be here with you on this beautiful sunny afternoon. And we're going to talk about cemeteries and funeral practices today. I'm mostly Argenteuil because, well, I'm specialized in Argenteuil history. So at first, I'm going to show you a picture. There we are. Okay. What do you see? That's quite a big question. You see markers. You see probably well, a cemetery. Well, for me as an historian, what I see people, I see names, I see historical information on who were those people, who are buried there, uh, what was the time they were living, what was it like when they were living. You know, that one here, I'm going to show you with my arrow here. That's a memorial that has been settled there for Sullivan Hutchins, who was one of the first pioneer in Lachute. And when he arrived in Lachute with his wife in 1796, he was probably one of the two pioneer family coming to Lachute in those days. And his wife, Elizabeth Baker, she died in 1801. So she was probably the first person to die here in Lachute. And what is incredible is that she probably died in winter time. So there was no cemeteries in those days. There was not even some kind of a village in Lachute. There was only pioneer families settled on farms around the North River. So what John Sullivan Hutchins had to do with his wife, he had to protect her corpse underneath rocks so that wolves or bears or whatever animal could not, well, uh, damage the corpse. And at the end of the winter in springtime, uh, they decided the community that was there, probably Jedediah Lane Jr., his sons, Ezekiah Clark, John Sullivan Hutchins, Powers family, and then the Stone families were owning the mills. They probably all decided that, well, we should bury Elizabeth right here uh, on this plot, on this land, and that will become the community cemetery. And so they probably did the ceremonies in a farm or in a kitchen because there was no churches, and then they buried Elizabeth Baker. And after that, John Sullivan Hutchins got married again a second time, and his second wife died a couple years later on, around 1812. So they did probably the same process because in 1812 there was no priest in Lachute. There was not even a church built. So they were still doing the ceremonies, the church ceremonies in barns or in kitchens. And John Sullivan at that time, Hutchins, he was the well the priest who was holding all these ceremonies. And probably in those days too, Richard Bradford, who came from Chatham, came up to Lachute to do the burying of his second wife. And after that, John Sullivan Hutchins got married a third time, and he survived his third wife. So all these informations are on that marker. So it's more than a marker. It's more than just a cemetery. To me, and it should be to for everybody, it's history. It's our history. It's the people who lived there, the people who came here before us. They are all in those cemeteries spread around Argenteuil or Arundel or any township up north or any town, French town or in the Laurentian. So it tells the story of the people. And if you want to know where your ancestors are from, you just look on the markers of those ancestors, and you will probably see that, oh well, mine are from Ireland, mine are from Scotland. Oh, I know the Hutchins, they came from Massachusetts, or they came from Vermont. So you see, it's more easier when you do genealogical research on your family and everything. So cemeteries, they are the olders. It's kind of a great book open to us all. It's like a big library on these people, and it tells the story of these people. You know, sometimes it will tell how they died, and also sometimes we will have just a little phrase saying he lived a life in peace, or he died in peace, or he died of cancer, or whatsoever. You see, so it holds important informations, and a big knowledge of who were those people who came here before us, who were those pioneer families who settled all these lands. So that picture to me tells it all. And so, and two, you can look at this one here. Not only you have the names, you have dates, but you have images, you know, and those images tells you a lot about the people who was buried underneath in the ground. You know, like this is a sol pleureur, and it means the abundance, and we will see in the lecture what all these character means. Okay, any questions? As for the introduction, in my speech, I will talk about a survey that we did in Argenteuil in all the cemeteries, family cemeteries, community cemeteries, and abandoned cemeteries that we have in the MRC d'Argenteuil. And you can figure that in Arundel, it's probably the same thing, and all the townships around where they were a mix of communities living. And when I talk about mixed communities, I would say more about the faith of these communities, you know, like Catholics, Irish Catholics, Irish Protestant, Anglicans, and Presbyterian, Baptist. All faith had their own cemeteries, you will see.
We have one question. How
Yeah.
old is Argenteuil?
How old is Argenteuil? Argenteuil was the Seigneurie d'Argenteuil was conceded in 1680, so that's quite old. You see, that's well close to 340 years old. But people settled in Argenteuil in the southern part around 1725. And after that, well, it was mainly French Canadian who came from the seigneuries of Montreal and the southern part of Montreal, or other from Vaudreuil and Rigaud, and they came up the North River. And then after that, the seigneurie got really a big expansion and development around 1795, 1796, when they opened up the colonization, and people from Vermont, Massachusetts, and Connecticut came to settle Argenteuil. And after that, around 1808, Scots people and Irish people came here too, families, and then they opened up the townships. So you mean Chatham townships, and then Grenville township, and then they opened up north with Arrington and Wentworth and Gore, and then up to Moronites and Arundel and everything. So we would say that the main character of Argenteuil probably raised in the 19th century, from 1810 to 1880, about, I would say. Okay, Argenteuil, both a rich religious heritage that is reflected in the many churches, chapel, presbyteries, and cemeteries that dot its landscapes. So some of you people probably came to Lachute and or know about St. Andrews. in the 19th century, and well, even today, you could find traces of all these churches. St. Andrews had seven churches of mixed faith. Lachute had six, and those churches are still there today. So it's really our richness of patrimoine uh, is old in all these those buildings. Um, when you look at the Lachute Protestant Cemetery back in 1881, there was two churches built in that cemetery. There were the Methodist, and then there were the Presbyterian. They finally moved those churches close to the village and decided that this big land would hold the community cemetery. And it was not outside the village, because in the 19th century, there were two villages in Lachute. There were Lane's Corner, which is right in front of Dunani Road, the bridge that crossed to Dunani Road, and then there were Lachute Mills. Lachute Mills was on the western side of Lachute, close to the river, the North River, just I would say at the end of Argenteuil Street and Grace Street, close to what is the mill today there. It's Cascade Mill. So there was one village there and the other on the east end. And when the train came to Lachute, the whole village kind of built like a mushroom town. It would be called a boom town in those days, you see, because in about 5 years, the whole main street was built and the churches kind of move center town, so close to Main Street. And today you have the United Church, you have the Anglican Church, you have the Presbyterian, the Margaret Rogers Church on the Main Street. So you could imagine that that was an industrial community. And you go to St. Andrews, um, the village was not on the east, the east side of the river. It was on the western side of the river. So on the other side that there's the village now, close to Christ Church, there was the town hall, and you had the Presbyterian Church there. You had the Baptist Church. You had a Congregationalist Church. The Catholic Church was in the corner between the St. Andrews and Carillon. So it was quite different than today, I would say. So we'd say that the richness of Argenteuil holds in his patrimonial building for sure, and its landscape. So uh, we uh, we kind of uh, went on the research with one question: how to preserve and how to enhance these cemeteries? Because at first start, we started the study with the idea that we had 37 cemeteries in Argenteuil. So that's quite a lot. And the thing that we wanted to do is we wanted to identify them. We wanted to go on site, take pictures, so that with a picture, with a kind of Polaroid, you would say that we would have an image of the cemeteries in time, just like the people that came before us did. They did those research in the 60s, and then after that in the 70s, and then after that in the 80s. And we wanted to do that in the 2010s. So we started with that. And we asked the people of Argenteuil just to tell us where there were other places or of burying what people buried, or family cemeteries that we didn't know. And we had so many answers. We went up to 57. We started at 37 and it grew to 57. And we had to stop, because after 5 years of research and doing, visiting those places, we stopped, and we could have gone up to 70 places of cemeteries in Argenteuil. So that's quite a big patrimoine, we would say. And we ask ourselves, how can we preserve all that? Because we knew at that time that our history is all there. So we decided to kind of build tools. at first we take pictures uh, as far as we know what we have in our hand. After that, we could all as a community help each others, in preserving the cemetery. So this is the way that we decided to go on. So at first we discover, and then we try to understand them. And trying to understand them, this is the part that I had lots and lots of work, because I proposed to the MRC to do the history of each and every cemeteries that we had. So I end up writing and researching for 57 places with names that I didn't know. And at that time, I was just starting to, specialize in the Argenteuil history. So you can imagine all the knowledge that it came to me as an historian. So now I know almost every inches of Argenteuil, I would say. So Argenteuil cemeteries. So they are the witness to history and the settlement, just like we said. It's valuable information
Sorry, we
about
have
early
a
pioneers.
question.
Yeah, you have a question? Yeah.
Argenteuil must be huge today with a question mark. The
If
size.
it's huge. There's a difference between the MRC d'Argenteuil and the Argenteuil County, which is more of a electoral circumscription. Argenteuil MRC holds 9 municipalities. And those 9 municipality starts in the southern part with St. Andrews, and then after that, Brownsburg, Chatham, and Grenville, and then after that, Grenville-sur-la-Rouge, you have Gore, you have Lachute, you have Wentworth, you have Mille, and there's the ninth one that I forget. It is, oh gee, normally I do not forget.
I think it's Harrington.
It's Harrington. You're right. You're right. I forgot the western part. So you have 9 municipalities in the MRC d'Argenteuil. If we talk about the Argenteuil County, which is an electoral circumscription, we would bring in part of Mirabel, part of Saint-Colomban, Arundel, and part of Moronites. I would say so. Our study really stopped with the MRC's territory, because we had financial aid from the MRC and from the government of Quebec for Ministère de la Culture and everything. So to build such a big study, we had to hold it in our territory. It's okay. So provide details about country, origin, and birth. It shows the diversity of the cultural tradition and the religious practice, which is something that, I do bring kids in cemeteries. See, sometimes I will go visit one of our cemeteries in Lachute or in St. Andrews with kids from grade 4, so primary school. And I asked them, what's your family name? And they say, Simard, okay. Then go run around, go look around on the marker and tombstones. If you could find somebody who had the same name as you, or your first name or second name or whatsoever. And every time one of the kids come up, I found a Campbell. Oh, I found a McEwitt, or you see. So they do that quest for their ancestries. And just like a little game that we do, hide and seek or something in cemeteries, cemeteries, we know that it's it's something sacred, but it is a place that people have to go through and try to find themselves in there. So I do these little games with kids. So and it give us a chance to talk about the religious practices that are kind of vanished in in these days, and most of the times they are all that remains of the pioneer settlement. I explained that You go, you know about Shrewsbury. Shrewsbury is close to Moronites, and it's in the Gore Township. Uh, at the beginning of the 20th century, Shrewsbury was an active community. People farmed the land there. They had been farming that land for about 60 to 80 years. And well, slowly the community, well, spread. Some of these people went up to Arundel, others went up to Moronites, others went down to Ontario, and some went out west. And slowly the community kind of disappeared, and all that was remained that of the that pioneer settlement was the church and the cemetery. And lucky that it was preserved up until the time that we started to do the study. We had the chance to take a really nice picture of that little church in Shrewsbury that, well, was burned down in 2014. And but the cemetery is still there, and the community is really active in preserving that little space. And when you look around, there's no more there's no more farms. Well, the land is full of little forest. See, it's like the nature got back in place of human. And if you didn't know of that there was a church there in a cemetery, you probably never knew that, and will never know that there was a community living there for about 100 years. So you go up Scotch Road, same thing. You remember that Scotch Road is the, when you take the exit from the 50 to go to Grenville Village, instead of turning on the left, you turn on the right and you go up the hill. And that was the little road that the pioneer family took, and walking up to Grenville, up to the range up north, up to Harrington, and even that Scotch Road, which is La Route des Écossais, which is the road that the Scots people took to go up to Arundel, and it was crossing over Lake McDonald, you know, and crossing from east side to west side up to Rouge Valley, and then from Rouge Valley they walked just by the Rouge River up to Arundel. And that road was a pioneer road, and there were settlement around the Scotch Road, close to the 8th range, which today we only have the Scotch Road Cemetery as a témoin, as a witness of that settlement. You see, so by doing these studies about on cemeteries, we found out that there were communities living there. And I'll tell you an anecdote. I was walking up there with Cecil McPhee, who was our guide on that tour, and Cecil told us all about the history of the Scotch Road community. And then he said to me, "You want to see something really strange?" And I said, "Yeah, that'll be, well, exciting." Or I was not really sure, because, well, at that in those days I didn't use Cecil as well as today. And he brought us a couple of yards down the hill on the side of the road, and he said, "Okay, we're at the right place. We're going to walk in the wood." So we went up walking in the woods, and he showed us a place where there was an Anglican church that was named the Mountain Church back in 1860. And from I would say 1840 to 1880, there was an Anglican community living on the Scotch Road, and they had that little church, and they had a cemetery. But today there is no marker raised or left there to tell us that there are people buried in the ground there. So there's only trees. And when you walk in that wood, you could go into the church, because the foundation of the church, which is the rock foundation, is still there, and you see the quadrilatère of the church on the ground, and you walk in there, you say, wow, it's amazing. You know, 150 years ago there were people sitting here having a church practice there. So and that little church was moved around 1890 to another community by the Ottawa River that was named Stonefield. And today the church doesn't exist anymore because it's underneath 60 feet of water. So you see, stories like that came up to me because I did that research on cemeteries, which is quite extraordinary. You have any questions or comments? So we did that inventory of the cemetery. If you are really interested in that inventory, you can find it. You could find it on the MRC's website, and it's a PDF, and it has been translated in English. So I'm really happy because most of the people who are interested in cemeteries are mainly English speaking. So it's really a nice job. It's a big volume. I'll show you. It's like this, and you have pages, and you have the history of all the little cemeteries in Saint Andrew, in MRC d'Argenteuil. So, okay, so what we did, we compiled a list of the cemeteries. Like I said, we started with 37 and end up with 57, and still we got 13 to do. And I do not know if we're ever going to do a second phase, but I really do hope so. So
I hope so too.
yeah. So we did a data. We constituted a database. We did field visit, like I said, documentary and historical research, which was my great part, and process the data. And we wrote about these historical records. So in the inventory, when you come up to a page, I'll switch on the highlights. So out of the 57 that we visit, we'd say that Brownsburg Chatham has 12, Gore 5, Grenville 2. Grenville is Grenville Village. It's right in the village. But there's only one left in Grenville. The other one is, well, it has been moved. I'll tell you more about that. Grenville-sur-la-Rouge, and then Arrington, the Chute 6, Mille 3, St. Andrews 5, and Wentworth at 6. And the thing is that out of these number, what is incredible is that more than 80% of the cemeteries are Protestant, only 9 Catholic, and 2 are others. Those others, one would be the Greek Orthodox, the little sister, the Black Sisters that you probably encounter in the Maronites market, on Lachute market. They are makers of a really good goat cheese and feta goat cheese too. So those little round piece of cheese. And the other one would be a native cemetery. With the native cemetery, it was probably Iroquois, because les Iroquois, the Iroquois, they buried their death back in from I would say 3,000 years ago. And the thing is that sometimes they did not left the bones or the corpses into the ground, because they moved the village all around the country, just to farm the land, because they were farmer. And what they did is they brought a little bit pieces of those people who died with them. And then when they established 5 kilometers away from that other village, they buried people there. We know about these practice because back in 1950, or I would say in the 50s, one of the mayor of Lachute, Bellingham, he used to work in St. Andrew's Cemetery, and he talked about it to one of the Watchman journalists Norman Thornburn, and he said that, I remember, while I was digging for a tombstone, and we kind of encountered bones, and these bones were probably Indians' bones, you see. And we tried in our research to find out where it was exactly in the St. Andrew's Protestant Cemetery, but it's like trying to find what do you say that, a needle in a in the whole territory of Argenteuil, I would say. So, but we decided to tell the story because it was important that the people know that there were others before us. Well, I would say us white people, but I say white people, but I have Montagnais blood, so uh, we're all mixed all together. So, but it was important in our report to tell that Argenteuil was occupied before the European arrived here. So. And the other thing that we found is that most of the cemeteries of Argenteuil, they were founded from the 1800 to 1875, which is quite incredible. So that means that we have really an old patrimonial inventory. And the fact that it is really old means that probably it is really endangered, because the markers, the transcriptions on the markers are vanishing with the time, and some of the tombstones or the markers are they are destroyed, they fell down, the ground is bumpy, and sometimes the caretakers did not take the time to just lift the markers, and the ground went up over all the markers, and now they're passing with the lawnmower over all these things. So it's really an endangered patrimoine, so which is quite incredible. It's an old one. It's really old compared to other parts of the province. Okay, so it's 86% of the inventory that are from the 19th century. So researching for history of the cemeteries, it's also telling the story of churches and pioneer families. With the churches, sometimes we went into certain cemeteries, and there used to be a church, and well, we asked people living around what was about the church, and so people, I've heard my grandpa told me about something like that. But that was in the 20s, you see. Well, the 20s, not the 2020s, was 1920s. And so we had to go back in our books, in our land. I'm looking for the word. We'll come back. So we had to go really back in time to find out about the story of these churches, because it is important to understand that we wanted to qualify these the cemeteries into, was there a church before? Was it a family cemetery that became a community cemetery? Is this a place that was outside of the hamlet or outside of the town, or was it in the middle of the town? Because sometimes the town built around the churches, and the cemeteries were right in the middle of the town, like we when you go through Mille-Île, that little hamlet has two church and two cemeteries right in the downtown Mille-Île. But don't close your eyes, you would have passed through downtown Mille-Île. But you see, you have the Anglicans and the Presbyterians, they're right in front, and the road pass in front. So that was one case. But when you go through Avocat, Avoca Road, you end up on the Crawford land, and there used to be a church there, the St. Mary's Church, and just behind the Anglican Church, there was a cemetery there. But today the church is not it's not there anymore. When we did our study, the church was still up, but it was in a really bad condition. But today, well, it doesn't exist anymore. But we had the chance to take picture of that church. That was the same thing that happened with Shrewsbury. See, it was a beautiful little wooden church. So when we did the historical records, you see, we gave numbers to the and always the township and the number of the church, and then the year of the foundation, and a couple of pictures here. That is the Holy Trinity in Lakefield and Gore Township, and writing about historical facts and who were those people buried there. Was there an important people of on our history or in of the hamlet's history that we could write about, tell a little story, a little details and stuff like that. So, and sometimes we tried to list the number of tombstones that we encounter in the cemetery, you see, and always naming those who helped us in the process. As for Holy Trinity, was Louise Johnston that was there for us, and Leslie Parker. The year that we visited the cemetery is really important. The number of burial before 1900, we wanted to know if the cemetery was really an old one or it was recent, and at the time that we visited it. Other things that we try to see is the typology of the cemeteries. So was it an orphanage cemetery, like the church had disappeared and the cemetery is left alone? Is it integrated? So it means that the cemetery is built all around the church. We have example of that as a Christ Church in St. Andrews. There were markers all around. Today there's only markers in the behind because most of the markers have fell down. Was it on the public road? Other things, was it an adjoining cemetery, like the church is there and the cemetery is a little bit further in the back or on the side? Is it really isolated? Avoca Cemetery, which was named the old McLean Cemetery because the land was owned by Mr. McLean, who was buried there at first, and then after that, the community decided to name it Avoca Cemetery. It's an isolated cemetery. Argenteuil Cemetery is an isolated one too. See, so after that, we wanted to know if it was a satellite cemetery, like the church is there and the cemetery was there. Edina up over Pine Hill wasn't a satellite cemetery, but now it's an orphanage cemetery because the little Baptist church that was close to the cemetery got moved to Brownsburg in 1910 or something like that. See. We wanted to know about the spatial organization of the cemeteries. Was it non-orthogonal? So, like, family, they would buy a family plot, which would be like a 10 feet by 20 feet. And we decided that we're going to bury grandpa on that corner and grandma on the other corner because we don't want them to spend eternity, in chicane or arguing. It's about like that, so there was no rule of burying people. Cemetery park, mainly they became parks because of the time and the trees that grows just beside the plots, or just beside the tombstones, or the trees that got over the tombstones. We had images about that. Orthogonal is mainly on the Catholic side. There was really arranged and really ordonné. You see, like it has to be to have a straight line between the tombstones and everything. So mainly Catholics. So we have here the portrait of we have mainly isolated cemetery in Argenteuil. Some of them are adjoining, not many, well, only one integrated and satellite. But in those isolated cemetery, there was the three categories. We had family cemetery, community cemetery, and then orphanage cemetery. You have any questions? Well, I'm talking a lot, eh? It's okay? Great. Family cemeteries. Oh, pictures. This is beautiful. You know, Cameron family cemetery in Grenville-sur-la-Rouge. You see what they built, this big wall of rock, you know, and it's holding inside there a couple of tombstones, and well, the ancestors are buried there. It's really beautiful place in the woods. The first burial grounds of Argenteuil, they were family cemeteries. Like I told you at the start, you know, for Elizabeth Baker to, there was no church in those days. There was no community cemetery. So they had to decide to a place where they will, the pioneer will bury their death. As for farmers mostly and people who are living in the mountains and in the woods, normally they would not transport the dead people to a community cemeteries, but mainly there were none. So they decided to bury the death in the backyard or some places that had a meaning for them. You see, this is the grave of John Ostrom, who was Captain John Ostrom. John Ostrom came to the front of Chatham around 1805, and he was a revolutionary. He was in the Revolutionary Army of George Washington when he decided to come and settle here in Argenteuil. And you see, Argenteuil, we had lots of United Empire loyalists who came at the same time. So they were enemies. American in the America, they were enemies, and here in Argenteuil, they were neighbors. So they had to live together. And John Ostrom was really appreciated by all the community of the front of Chatham. And one day he decided to go fishing just by the Ottawa River, and close to the ridge, and he fell down and he drowned in the water of the Ottawa River. So the old community, Methodist, Presbyterian, Anglicans, and everybody came to his funeral, and they decided to raise that kind of monument, and it is still there, right in the middle of the field. And I know the owner of that land, and he said, I do not know what to do. The only thing that my heart tells me is that do not move it. So he crops around the tombstones, and which, you know, we're lucky that he is listening to his heart because it is still there. See. The Dixon family cemetery in Gore, you see, it needs a lot of love, we would say. In the back of the fence, you have the markers that are felled down and everything. And well, we had the chance to go there because Leslie Parker knew about it. Somebody told him about it, and we went there and we took pictures. Well, it's mainly the husband and wife who are buried there. You have here, that's the McVicker, and it's in fall time, so there's a lot of leaves, but normally it is really beautiful and well kept. You see the fence there, and it's a nice place to spend eternity. Cameron, that was the first one with the big wall. You see, it's right in there. and this is the Fox family cemetery in Arrington Valley. Uh, you see in the back there, you have the mountains. It's the valley down there, and when we went there, it was funny because it was in the fall time, which is the period of the hunting, eh? And we went knock on the door, and that lady answered, and she told us, "Oh, do not go up there, not now." I said, "Why?" "It's hunting season." And you will probably end up with, well, maybe there will be an accident or something. So I suggest that you come back later, probably in December. So we went up there. That was in oh, sorry, that was in December, and it's on the land of Sonny McRae. Sonny McRae is an old guy, about these days he was close to 80 years old, and big guy. He was still working on his tractor, and he was trying to pull out a big wheel. And I said, "Oh, hello, Mr. McRae." He said, "Oh, don't call me McRae. I'm Sonny. I'm Sonny McRae." I said, "Well, we're trying to go visit that the Fox family cemetery up there on the top of the hill." And he said, "Oh, yeah, the Fox cemetery. Oh, it's a beautiful place out there." Well, I didn't know if he was speaking English or Gaelic or French or whatsoever, but he had a thick accent, and it was really funny to hear. I said, "Oh, wow, it's a beautiful place. When I'm gonna die, I'm gonna bury up there, and I'll make sure that nobody will ever touch my valley, because this valley is so beautiful." He's again. Well, probably he got something against progress, or the fact that people comes and live in the valley. But it is really a beautiful, and I do understand why he wants to be buried up there. Probably will be closer to heaven or whatsoever, but it is really a beautiful place. They choose that family. They choose a really beautiful place to spend eternity.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Was any mention made in those days of cremation?
Well, no. I it was, well, the way that we do cremation today, it's mostly like I would say 95%. We're up to 95% of the burying, or I do not know if we still have the choice. See, it's only cremation or whatsoever. But in those days, probably they didn't do any cremation. Or if it was a practice in the community from where they came from, probably, but I'm not really sure. But we could tell, because when you walk in a cemetery, and there is a little deep in the ground, that goes like this, and you walk there and say, "Oh, wow, there perturbation on the landscape." It's probably because the casket that was not filled with ground, it kind of rotten, and then the ground went up, and it created those things. And this is why sometimes that the tombstones are falling down, because of the movement of the ground, that see. So if there was cremation, the land would never move, you see, because it's only little things that we hold the ash. So, but I wouldn't tell. I'm trying to think. I think it out loud, but I wouldn't know. Okay. Community cemeteries. Oh, this is beautiful here. Sorry. Harrington Cemetery. That's the Shaw Cemetery for those who know the old names. It's really beautiful place. So it's the first manifestation of social organization in the area, that we say, because it started with one marker, one family, and then the neighbor came and say, "Oh, grandpa or grandma died. Can we bury it bury her or bury him in your cemetery?" And then, well, slowly it became the community cemetery. Other times, the community decided that piece of land would hold the community cemetery. But in our territory, in Argenteuil, I would say the practice was more like it started with a family cemetery and then it became the community cemetery. Which was the case at Scotch Road, which was the case in Avoca, which was the case on the Shaw Cemetery. So Arrington, Lost River, the same thing, I would say. Up to Glen of Arrington, I would say. Gore was the same thing. So as for Melil, they probably built the church and then decided to have the cemetery on the side of the, here we have the Glen. Here we have St. Andrews. St. Andrews is the oldest one in Argenteuil, and today it's like a beautiful park. You see, it's so beautiful. I will tell you an anecdote about, I was living in Montreal in the 90s, and I had a friend from St. Andrews, Salette, and he was a photograph, and one day he died, and I never knew where he was buried. And while doing our research in the St. Andrews Protestant Cemetery, I was walking by some row in the back rows of the cemetery, and then I went to a marker, and it was written Salette, and I said, "Wow!" And then I read, oh yeah, that's Christian Salette. That's my friend. So I finally found a long lost friend, you see, and it was quite emotional at that time. And I still go by, since I found him, and I took time to pay my respect to him and talk to him of the whole 15 years that we kind of didn't have the chance to talk. So
I have another question before I
yeah.
continue. What is the oldest tombstone you ever saw?
The oldest one would be around 1810, and that would be in the St. Andrews Cemetery. Yeah. But sometimes what happened is that at first they would use a wooden marker, and well, the problem with the wooden marker that it would rotten with time. And what they do is just like they did for the John John Sullivan Hutchins' wife. They do a commemoration of the people who are buried in that plot. So on Ardoise, or on the White Rocks, or on granite. So it will tell us, but it's not the original one, you see. And it always depended on if the family was rich enough to pay for a granite marker or a white rock marker, see, which is limestone. Okay, orphaned cemetery. Shrewsbury is now one. This is the church that I told you about, St. Mary's Church in Avoca, on Avoca Road, over Pointe aux Chênes. See, I was an Anglican one, and if you know about Thomas's Gore, on Thomas's Gore, there's a little church there. So it's probably the same architecture that they used on Thomas Gore. It was the same on St. Mary's. It's close. We have here the cemetery. You see, you have a cross here like that. These are metal. So, and they are old, they're 1890 around. Edina, which was a Irish Protestant community, and the church cemetery. You have here, this is St. Matthew's in Grenville. St. Matthew's was built in 1832, so you probably imagine that there were people buried there before that, because with the construction of the Grenville Canal that started in 1819, there were people living down there. And one thing is beautiful, we'll come back to that. Holy Trinity, 1840s. You have a St. Mungo's, 1836. And that church is a Church of Scotland. It's not Presbyterian. It's Church of Scotland. It looks like a beautiful castle. Abandoned cemeteries. We've encountered many of them. When we say it's abandoned, it's because we cannot read the markers. We know that there are people buried underneath here, but we cannot know otherwise than with the oral history that there are cemeteries here. So that's the case of the Robinson family there. I've heard lately about the Robinson family a couple of weeks ago, that the wife died, and the husband, Mr. Robinson, decided to just let it go. He didn't want to live alone. So he had cows, and he let the cows go in the field, and he just kind of let himself go. And so a couple of weeks later, people came to his farm, and they found him dead. So they buried him just beside his wife. But the cows were still running in the field in those days. So we have the Old Park Cemeteries in Lachute. That's on the Denani Road, and we went there 3 times to find the little cemetery of that family, just close by the old house that was built there. Thomas Aiken in Wentworth. It's beautiful today, but well, in those days, and that's a Leslie Parker photograph, but the fences fell down, and Thomas Aiken, his story is quite interesting because he was a priest, but at the end of the 19th century, they called that the type of priest that Thomas Aiken was. He was a holy roller, meaning that he was traveling from places to places and preaching of the Lord without any churches, and that was a holy roller. And he finally ended up, if my memory is not mixed, close to Michigan. But when he died, he wrote in his testament that he wanted to be buried close by his childhood house in Wentworth. So this is why the tombstones is underneath there. And this is today. That's a Dixon family that we saw. Lost and relocated cemetery. Okay. The Mountain Church Cemetery. See, that's the story about the church that I told you on Scotch Road. The church is underneath these trees here, and the people are buried in the back there. Very Island in Wentworth, we have a vanished cemetery. We went on the island twice, and we never find any traces of markers or something. So it's quite. We have to go back there. If any of you ever know where it is, we'll be glad to bring you up to Vary. Upper Lachute Cemetery. Upper Lachute is Bourbonnière, Camp Bourbonnière. You see, you have that little church there, and then you had a school by, and then there was a cemetery. The cemetery disappeared around 1870. Some of the tombstones, they have been relocated in the Protestant cemetery in Lachute, but others stayed there. And a story told us that was it a Doig? I think it was a Doig, and he decided to just bull all the old tombstones in the river. So me and Bob Roger and Leslie Parker had one time an idea of going into the river to dig up the old tombstones, but I think we didn't go up to the end of our idea. So you see, you have here, okay, current status. So out of the 57 cemeteries that we have in Argenteuil, we have only 26 that are still active. 6 are semi-active, and all the others are either lost, relocated, abandoned, or inactive. When we say relocated, I'm sorry, um, in for the Catholic, like in Lachute, the cemetery was built around the old Saint Anastasia Church on Bethany Street. And when they decided to build a bigger church, they decided to ask people to move the corpse and, well, the dead people and the marker to a new place that they decided to build a cemetery. And that new place was close to LRHS school on Argenteuil Street. So a bigger place, a bigger cemetery. So you can imagine in 1921, 22, after the Spanish flu, that you will go up to the cemetery and dig a grandpa or grandma and bring them to another places that they could be buried. So most of the family didn't want to do that. They moved the marker, but they didn't move the corpse. So today, underneath the Saint Anastasia parking lot, there are probably lots of people still buried there. And the thing is that the the Catholic, they didn't do like most of the Protestant or Anglican community, write a little écriteau saying underneath that parking lot are the remains of pioneer families who came here, and because there used to be an old cemetery, so they do not have this historical relation with the cemeteries. They did the same thing with the St. Andrew's Catholic Cemetery, that was erected behind the old church on the detour that goes from St. Andrew's to Carillon. See, the church was around here, and the cemetery was just by close to the Ottawa River. And they asked the family to move the deaf people, but still, I would say in the 2010, they moved the last tombstone of that St. Andrew's Cemetery. And it's the same thing with the Grenville Catholic. They did that too. I do not recall having a case of cemetery moved in the English community. I do not recall of that, but it was mainly in French community.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What happened to all the hard copies of All Buried? The churches used to take care of them.
The hard copies, some of them are probably at Archives nationales du Québec, or it's the diocese that has the hard copy of and the listing of those people who are buried. If you on the Catholic, they are not really willing to share all these things, but I know that for the Anglicans, the diocese has it. Some of these, I think we have one or two at the museum, but others, they are probably still in the churches or something like that. So, okay. So out of our inventory, we came up with a report and recommendation. So we decided, we suggested that to support and recognize the work of volunteers and association, we would promote collaboration between the stakeholders. So you see, there are lots of energy in most of the community for taking care of all these old cemeteries, and every one of them has different practices, different ways of looking at it, and we wanted to just put all these energy all together and say like, okay, this weekend or this fall, we're going to do a lot of work all together at Holy Trinity, and then next season in springtime we will go to Argenteuil, and then you see, instead of being one or two, we could bring more people to take care and have a Argenteuil community of caretakers, all together, instead of each one of them, putting lots of energy in our cemetery, trying to protect it, with a joint association will be, well, people would share and help each others. Other things that we wanted to is to raise awareness. This is the whys of these type of conference that I'm doing, raise awareness to the population of, it's an important place to take care. Our history, it's our ancestors. And even if I'm not a McEwitt, or I'm not a Crawford, it's part of my blood. It's part of my my history. So these pioneers' families are those who came here. So I have to take care of that, what they built of. This is the raising of awareness, and this is what I do with kids at school too. I tell them, you go there, you take care of these places. Other things, planning through municipalities, and that it be part of the political agenda, which is quite important, because it's the first starter of protection. See, protect and conserve, and protect the cemeteries of significant heritage value, but all of them. So this is why we came up with the report. You see, this could stay underneath the ground, but we lose all these information because Mrs. Wade, she's part of our history. She's one of us. She was there before us. So I really like that picture. This is the type of thing. This memorial stone reminds us that there were friends and families buried in this Avoca cemetery in an unmarked grave. So they took care of installing that plaque there in Avoca. Yeah, you have any question? It's okay.
Does anybody have any questions? If you do, just unmute yourself and then you can ask your questions.
I'm looking in underwear.
May I ask, that McVicker cemetery that you talked about,
Yeah.
is that in Brownsburg?
Is it in Brownsburg? Not
If
sure.
I go to the link that Chloe
Yeah,
gave
yeah,
us.
you will find his location. You see.
Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
That's
In the
one I didn't know.
report, I'm not sure if it is in Grenville-sur-la-Rouge or
Yeah.
Brownsburg.
I'll look. I'm
Yeah.
interested in the document, so
Okay.
I'll look it up.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And you will see in the document we did maps like this, and we pinpoint everywhere that the cemeteries are, so you could follow through the maps. See.
So I'd be able to find, like, I know where the Scotch Road Cemetery is, but I don't know exactly where to go in.
Yeah, but
So
you would have the indication on the in those maps. Yeah, yeah. But there are places that we kept secret. You would understand that sometimes if it is on a private property, I see people do not want to have people coming there. See, so. But there is always a way to reach the owner of the land and ask permission to go there. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, John. Yeah.
That's all good.
Okay, great. So
I have a question. Do all cemeteries have communal cemetery grave for the poor?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I know that that's that's a Catholic practice, but I we didn't I do not recall encountering uh, any kind of thing like that in the Anglican or Protestant or Presbyterian cemetery. But I do remember that in the Catholic ones they have places for the poor. That's for sure, and places for the infant. And sometimes you see Catholic. Um, when the funeral ground was all full, okay, what they did back in those days was build a stone wall all around the ground and then put ground all over, and they do a second story of yeah, that's what they did. And when they transfer the dead people from one place to another, sometimes they would have a commune, all where and they would just put the markers all around. That's what they did. And as we are in that topic, I remember, sometimes there were a certain feud between the old one from back on in the back road and the priest, and so the priest decided to bury the uh, the old farmer with his feet outside of the sacred plot. You see, because it is said that on uh, the day of the death, when God will come and bring all the soul up to heaven, people would know where to go, where to look. So this is why most of the tombstones are oriented uh, uh, through the rising sun, because on that judgment day, when the sun would come up, God would ask all the people to follow the light, and those who are not in the sacred ground would fall down, into oblivion or hell or whichever. So the priest would, bury the old bugger with his feet outside of the sacred land. But at night, the people of the family would come and, dig the casket and bring it all in the sacred ground, so that the old grandpa would be safe on Judgment Day. And other things is that, so sometimes when the person was not too well, such a good person, they would bury him, but looking west inside of east, see, so that it would be a little mixed up on Judgment Day. So there are things like that. Other things you see that we've encountered, on Rouge Valley, just beside Rouge River. On Rouge River, there were raftmen coming down the stream, and sometimes one of them would drown, and without any knowing who was that man. They buried him underneath the fence. So underneath the fence of the Rouge Valley Cemetery, there are a couple of, well, raftmen who drowned in the Rouge River that are buried there. So you see, we'll go with I will end my presentation with the funeral practices and the symbolism that we find on the tombstones and on the markers.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yes, my name is Brenda Bates Hand. I live in Alberta, but I own the property that had St. Mary's Anglican Church.
Oh yeah, wow.
And our family has been looking after the cemetery for my whole lifetime. It was built on my great grandfather's land.
Yeah, John Crawford, is that right?
That's right, John Crawford, and he was a surveyor that surveyed the
augmentation. Yeah. He was working with Joseph Bouchette.
That's right. Yes, yeah. I've been doing genealogy for 20 years, and I still have to do a lot of tracing John Crawford, we know he came from County Longford in Ireland. He gave the church property, and it stayed within the church until the 1970s when I bought it.
Okay.
And so it's only ever been in God's name and the Crawford family.
Wow.
Um,
And you know that genealogy is a never-ending dwell, eh?
yes, I have some very nice pictures of the old church. Unfortunately, you got to see it as it was coming down.
Oh, wow.
So it's removed, and we do look after the cemetery.
Yeah.
The last burial there was last fall, and it was my brother.
Oh,
So it is
wow.
continuing cemetery. My parents are there, my great grandparents, my grandparents, though John Crawford is buried in Grenville in the
Yeah.
cemetery. I have a question. We have some headstones that are damaged, or a couple that are lying down. Is there any particular way that they should be preserved, that we can restore them, or a better practice? I see some done in steel uprights and
Yeah, I
recast.
know. I know some. Some would use the a steel L like
Angle
that
iron,
to.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. To just put
Spread
them
them,
all together. Um, I would say, you see, have you had any contact with Geneviève Grenier at the MRC, which is the cultural agent who worked with me on that cemetery? Probably she could give you contact with the people from the cultural heritage of Quebec, and they have a certain guide that will help you on taking the best decision for the markers. You see?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's, I'm very, very concerned that they would disappear. Though
Yeah.
the family is quite involved. I have a nephew who is a Bates also,
Yeah.
because we're intermingled, who has been really looking after the cemetery for us, and we support him
Yeah.
monetarily if we can.
Yeah, and I do remember it's such a beautiful place up there, eh? And the way that the cemetery is kept with the it's like a cedar fence all around, and it's
That has
protected from the wind and
uh, my father and I put that fence in there, and of
okay.
course the cedars grow to be big trees. So we had,
Yeah.
when I had removed the church because it was dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, it was left in bad disrepair by the movie company that did the Education of Little Tree.
Oh yeah.
They destroyed the building, and
No.
it rotted, so it had to come down. We have some of the main logs that were in it. It was a log church,
Mm-hmm.
which we kind of planned to do, I don't know, some sort of a seating area, maybe using the logs or
Yeah.
something on that line.
And you know what could be done around the cemetery is just a little panel indicating there used to be a church here, and telling the story of the church, and with little pictures and
I actually have a very nice drawing of the
yeah.
church, and
Mm-hmm.
I put, since I intend to be buried in that cemetery also, I am going to have my tombstone made at the front of the church beside my parents. That's where my husband and I plan to be
Wow.
buried. But at the same time, on the back of the stone will be an etching of the picture of the church, and
Okay.
it's because it was established in the 1850s,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
demise was in the 1870s. It was deconsecrated then when I bought it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, but it was there, and I still have the sign from the church. I have the pulpit. I have the altar
wow.
rail. A lot of the stuff that was there,
Okay.
some of it was stolen, but the majority I still have, and put it into some context for the remembering of the church. So
Yeah. 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 And especially the Anglican community of Avoca, eh?
yes, and I have seen some of the church registers at the Anglican Diocese in Montreal. They
Mhm.
kind of lost some of the rain at the moment, but it was Saint Mary's was with the mostly with St. Matthew's Church in
In
Grenville. So
Grenville, yeah.
searching there, you will find some there, and then there's some rogue ones that end up in St. Philip for some reason. When it was microfished, it was,
Okay.
some things didn't get quite filed where they should be. So you have to do a little bit of searching around. And the question I have is there any indication or any way that the funeral homes release some of their records? Because that's one of the biggest reservoirs of, when people died or
Yeah.
when funerals were held, and that just the dates and
Well, that I don't know. I don't know. Normally, with the personal information, always go with the 50 years. After
that's right.
after the
But
dead people. So
I know
I'm not sure if they are on that side.
Yeah, but and now it's coming into a time where a lot of those records could be released,
Yeah.
published knowledge, and they are an unbelievable reservoir of information of all the families in a small community where they use the same funeral homes or whatever. So I was just interested if there was anything going on that side.
Yeah. Well, I would not be able to answer that. I'm sorry.
Don't want to start
And as for
project.
your your questions on the tombstones, I tell you, probably the best person to contact would be Geneviève Grenier at the MRC. Okay. Yeah,
Good.
and
I will.
you could hook up my email too by Chloe, and you can ask me questions on email. It goes for every one of you attending the conference. Okay.
Okay.
I'll make sure to include it in my follow-up, the
Yeah,
information.
great. Yeah, merci Chloe.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Brenda. Mrs. Bates. uh, the, we'll end the presentation with my last topic about the symbolism that we find on the markers, which says it's always much more than just a gravestone. The movable heritage of cemetery, everything that goes around fences, écriteaux, all these things, they have each and every one a story, just like we've heard from Ms. Bates about the cedar fence that she planted with her own hand with her father, which is quite an interesting story. You see, so it's always different from places to places, and it always depends too on the presentation that, well, the caretakers want to have. You have charnel house and cryptid. Like this one is really a beautiful place in St. Andrews. That's the St. Andrews Protestant Cemetery. That's the crypt, the charnel house, where they keep the dead people during winter time, and they have crypts like the Cushing crypt, which doesn't exist today. Today it looks like that. They had to bury it underneath the ground because too many people were going into it. Today you have mausoleum and columbarium that brings a different mobilier in the cemeteries. Crosses and calaveries, commemorative element. Like I said, Miss Bates, you could think of using a commemorative element like that, telling the story of the cemetery. As for gravestones, it has changed through time. See, from the 1800 to 1950, we've been using wooden graves. Today, not that many. Some people would use it, but we know that it doesn't last through times. Slate was used from the 1800 to the 1850s. Limestone was used. Limestone is more the whites one. The gray stone are really gray. And the problem with the limestone is that all the writing on it will vanish through times. You see, you will lose the information. As for the gray stone, for the marble one, it's really one of the best, but it was too expensive. Cast iron was used too. Copper was used. Wrought iron. But today we would say that mostly is granite, and granite as more resistant to cold water, the rain, the change of the weather. So today we find more granite. But in Argenteuil, I would say limestones and gray stones are the one that we will encounter at the most. The upright markers, we have so many of those, and the little markers. Mostly the little markers will indicate that there's a child buried there, probably the wife. Sometimes it will determine the length of the family plot. You see, there will be little markers at each corner of the plot. You would find pillars, columns, and those will indicate mostly of the wealth of the people. Stone crosses, which are quite rare, and this one here, you see the tree that grew through all the tombstones here. The tree was planted probably when Senator John Hamilton died. I would say around 1870. And he was from one of the Hamilton family who owned the Hamilton Mills in Hawkesbury. And George, his brother, and John, the senator, are all buried there with their wives. And they planted the tree there. So that tree is close to 150 years old. Obelisk, you have here. Flat grave markers on the ground. And then you have mausoleum. And this one here has a great story. See, this is a grist mill wheel. And the Keynes brother used to own a grist mill in Grenville. And the older one, not George. George was the mill owner, but Thomas Keynes. Thomas Keynes, he was in the British Army, and during the war of 1812, 1814, you heard about the gang, the British Army. They went up to Washington and they burned the White House. And Thomas Keynes was part of that group of soldiers who burned the White House in 1814. And he was a guy from Grenville. So when he came back to Grenville, he worked on the construction of the Grenville Canal, and then he worked at the mill and everything. So when he died, they decided to build a mausoleum like that with field rocks and the grist wheel mill wheel here. So, and this is behind of St. Matthew's Church in Grenville. If you want to go and visit it, it's quite spectacular. Plot cornerstone, like I said, and then fences. All type of fences. So it's part of the mobilier. And then at last, the funeral symbolism. You would see the finger pointing toward the sky, always indicates to the dead people the way to paradise. When the hand of God is coming down like this, it's that to protect you. And certain faith had different symbolism, like the Methodists used a lot of the finger. and the hand. The handshaking, it's a farewell. It's always the communication between the living and the dead. It's the farewell. We have time to say farewell. The Bible open on 2 blank pages represent a premature end. So probably the person died of illness or an accident or something like that. The traversin on top means the association between death and eternal rest. And the cross, the aspiration for eternal life. And you have the anchor. I don't know what happened with my pictures. They're bigger than, we do not see the anchor, but normally there will be an anchor. It symbolized hope, the hope of seeing you again. The lamb or small animals would represent the burial of a child. And you see, it's quite incredible. You see, it's Eleanor and Leslie Bates. So, with the pandemic that is afflicting each and every one of us, I always have a little pensée or thoughts to those people who lived through the cholera crisis of 1832, or the dysentery, or the pandemic of 1883. I remember encountering in one cemetery, it's probably the Tumulties, the mother died with 6 children of that epidemic, and they all died in the short length of time between, I would say a month. And I always think of them, through these times that we are living. How people are not so fortunate. And okay, the dove is the symbol of the soul, and then the rose embodied the eternal life. And then we have the weeping willow, evokes the tears of bare men. This is really a beautiful one. And the oak leaf personify immortality. And then you have the Freemasonry, and then the Shriners, and then so on and so on and so on. So I've been talking for quite a long time, eh?
Thank you so much. That was so interesting. So if anybody has any questions for Robert, please just unmute and you can ask. Oh, and somebody says there is a French word in previous cell that I don't understand.
Okay, which one?
I don't know if the person wants to unmute and mention which
Okay.
one. Where headstones in last 10 cells. Okay. I'm not sure which one it is.
Okay. I remember using